Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast, presented by Destination Arete. I'm David.
And I'm Mark. As brothers, we grew up telling stories together for over 15 years, and as adults, we wanted to continue telling stories. And we also wanted to invite you into our Brothers Brain Trust.
We started the Creative Community Podcast to talk about the beginning of our story, the stories that influenced us when we were younger, and then continue writing that story together.
Yeah, we're building a community of people who work together to find creative solutions to tell inspirational stories. Today, we're doing another top 5 list.
Yeah, sometimes on the podcast, we'll interview people who are incredible and amazing at their craft. And then sometimes you get to talk to us. And that's what today is. We get to have fun ranking things 1 through 5. We did this in a previous episode, and people really seem to enjoy it. So we're back for round 2. Mark, before we get started, 2 quick housekeeping items. First of all, your background is starting to level up here if people are watching on YouTube. My background is about to change drastically if people are watching on YouTube. And there's a clue in my background today as to why it will change drastically. So if you're not watching on YouTube, you want to pause, go find that, see if you can figure it out. Should be pretty simple. But yeah, over the coming months, if people see me nomadically traveling around the confines of my 1,000 square foot house, this reason behind me on the shelf is why. So I wanted to get that out there in the open. This might be the last time you see me in this pristine condition with all of my favorite things on the shelf behind me. But number 2, Mark, I wanted to ask you before we start talking about top 5 lists, the big thing we talk about on this podcast is story. I wanted to know, what's the last time a story impacted you and either made you consider changing your thinking, or changed your thinking, or changed your actions, or influenced you to do something? And it doesn't have to be deep. It can be as simple as you saw a billboard for a taco and you bought a taco. But I was just curious to know from you, when's the last time that happened?
Yeah. I did see an ad for I think it was like a McDonald's spicy chicken sandwich, and I did try it. So it was very spicy, but
Yeah.
So there's your billboard answer. The deep one is, I was thinking about this idea, and there's a story from, I think it's Corey Ten Boom, where her dad was with her at a train station, and she had been super worried about if they had been discovered, what would happen to them if she would have the courage to face what was ahead. And her dad told her, he said, when we ride the train, when do I give you your ticket? And she goes, right before I get on the train. He goes, that's because that's when you need it. I don't give you the ticket until you need it. He said, when you need the courage and the strength to get through something, the Lord will give it to you, but he won't provide it before then, because you don't need it before then. So don't worry about it. And so I was thinking about that story, and that's a story I've heard a lot. It's used a lot in sermon illustrations when preaching about fear and things like that. But I think it's a testament to the idea of hearing a story over and over and over again, because I think every time I hear that story, it seeps down just a little bit more. And it's ingrained in me now to the point that I can think about it responsively to a situation, where I literally will think, wait, when does he give us what we need? When it comes, when I'm falling into like a worrisome pattern or something like that. So that's a story that I'm really glad that the man who originally told that to his daughter did. And I'm glad that it has been preserved for the encouragement of other believers.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you an old story that is silly, and then I'll give you my deep one. One time I was watching the World Series, and they just kept playing this Taco Bell ad about a burrito with Frito chips inside of it. The game ended at like 10:45, and my sister and I got in the car. We drove to Taco Bell. We got a burrito that had Frito chips in it, and guess what? It was great. I'm not disappointed in that burrito. I remember that so fondly, and I've never been able to replicate it since that first time. Like, I've gotten it since then. That was good. So that was a time that I was influenced by the story of, David, you need this burrito. I believed it. And you know what? I don't know that they were wrong. The story that has impacted me the most recently is, I was interviewing someone for a project at work, and I asked him about whether or not he ever had intentional conversations with his wife and with his children about, like, I guess I was asking him if he'd ever talked with his wife and like they had ever sat down and said, this is what we're going to do to make our kids turn out the way we think they should. And he said, when you're so busy doing, you don't have time to think. And he said, we were just constantly pursuing what the Lord had for us. And our kids saw that. And our kids were there with us as we were doing it. And he said, praise the Lord. They received that for themselves and believed it for themselves. And, they are the way that they are today. I was there because I was actually interviewing his son and I was talking to him as kind of a bonus. I thought that was a really good encouragement. Because as I mentioned in the opener, I'm thinking about that sort of thing lately. And it was nice to know that, he was just pursuing the Lord, working hard, doing what the Lord had for him to do. And he was showing that to his children every day, being consistent with that example, and that the Lord rewards that, in the long run. So yeah, that's the last story that impacted me. All right, with that, we're going to play top 5 lists. It's our second time doing this, so I'll just throw it over to David. David, take it away. All right, this game is called Top 5. We played it a couple weeks ago in an episode called Top 5 Lists. Super simple. If you haven't heard it yet, not sure what you're doing with your life, but go listen to it. We'll put a link in the show notes. But this is the, quote, second half or next round. Mark, people really liked that episode. It did really well compared to other episodes we released around the same time. So we thought we had 2 more lists of 5 or 10 items that we thought we'd bring. And I have ranked 10 for the first one, 5 for the second one. We'll just do 5 like we did last time. But Mark, any questions before we get started? We're just going to give, I think we'll probably, do you want to go in ascending order or descending order here? Start with 5 and let's start with 1 and work our way to 5 with the alphabet.
Okay.
And then we'll start with 5 and work our way to 1 with the second part. So the first one is letters of the alphabet. How did you feel when I asked you to rank the 52 letters of the alphabet? For our listeners, I asked you to rank both capital letters and lowercase letters. So what was your initial response, Mark?
Are you talking about when you contacted me about this like a while back? Or
whatever you can remember, when I first said, I need you to rank the letters of the alphabet, like what was your response?
I guess I was a little confused at first.
Understandably so.
Yeah, because no one had ever asked me to do that before. I had been asked to write them many times, rank them, thought it might have been a typo, wasn't a typo. But
I was just looking for a handwriting sample.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. Did you think I forged a check? I don't know, David. What do you mean? But so I immediately started thinking about it. And I think the first list I sent you was like, well, like capital A first, lowercase a second. And then I just like started going in order of how I remember them in the classroom, I guess, from left to right. But then when we decided to do it as a topic for the podcast, I started putting more thought into it. And it really sent me down a great trail. If we have time, I'll tell you the entire trail that it led me down for making my decisions. And so it was really fun.
Can I read you some other responses?
Yes, absolutely.
One person I texted the form to said that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Another person said, I said, while you're here, help me out with this. They said, haha, what is this? I said, I'm curious to know. I've been thinking about it for a year, so I'm going to do a poll and then create a post about the results I get from the people ranking the alphabet letters. And they said, done. One person said, what is this? Question mark, question mark. I said, I want to know. I've had 20 people respond so far. They said, I think in terms of letters, aesthetic quality. So a single letter's aesthetic quality. Another person said, the alphabet thing is interesting. I'm thinking I'm boring, question mark, because my first instinct is to rank them in their order, all capitalized. Interesting. Another person sent me a Teams message, said, I didn't realize how opinionated I am about this. I said, right. He said, I've learned something new about myself today. And then last but not least, this person, you can't see it on SoundCloud, but this is an entire paragraph here in a text message. Cool. Well, given no context, I created a set of rules for myself, parentheses, being the type of person that I am, parentheses. Otherwise, I'd never be able to make up my mind. I decided on a hybrid of choosing letters that I feel like I use more than others, but omitting common letters that tend to be silent or that modify other sounds. I chose T, but not H, even though an H accompanies a T in so many words. I chose some vowels, but not E, because even though it appears in many words as an essential vowel, quote, just look at this sentence, it also tends to be wasted on the end of words like the or dance. Maybe I shouldn't. I still should have included E. Smiley face. Anyways, thanks. That was fun. So I asked you what your thoughts were because I had gotten a lot of different people to respond to me about uh, the alphabet, and it was interesting to see the various responses. I, like I said, have been thinking about which letters I value more than others, and I think my rankings will reveal something interesting. So why don't we just start with number one on our lists. So my first letter that I picked out of all of them was the capital letter D. Probably because I've written that letter maybe more times than any other letter as a person named David, as a person that writes their name a lot now or has written their name a lot in the past. Why did I choose the capital letter D? I don't know, but it's my number one. What about you, Mark?
My number one is T. Capital letter T.
Capital letter T. Mm-hmm. Any reasoning behind that?
It's a long story, but my top three letters are all associated with each other in some way. So yeah.
When are you going to tell us the story after the third letter?
I can if you want me to, but
okay, I'm interested to hear it. So my next letter was the lowercase a. Just because
there's a pattern.
There's a pattern. Yeah, you're gonna laugh. So I've got 2 of the 4 letters that make up my first name so far. But I like the A, especially when I had to include the first letter of the alphabet, I felt like, in the top 5, but I like the lowercase a because it has so many variations. You can do it without the little hat, or you can do it with the little hat. And as someone who used to give letters eyes and legs and pretend they were people, lowercase a was very usable in multiple scenarios. So that's my number 2, Mark. How about you?
Number 2 for me is S.
Okay. And then your number 3?
R.
All right. So TSR. And are they all capitalized?
Mm-hmm, they are indeed.
All right. What is your reasoning behind this? If you can give us the cliff notes.
When I started thinking about this assignment, I went through and I thought about, because my first thought was just, what are the letters that I think of when I think of the alphabet, and it led me down this road. So I was like, I realized I started developing this scenario of because I learned letters in school, I associate them with school and specifically with people in school. So I started from the back and I worked my way forward. So I always thought of W, X, Y, and Z as the too cool for school kids. Like, those guys are like the slough offs, right? They're in the back of the class. They always get in trouble. V was always trying to get into that friend group, but he could never get in. He was cool, but he was too quiet to get noticed. U, he was doing his own thing. R, S, and T, they were tight. They were actually cool. Like, they were good athletes. They were good at academics. And then Q and P, they were both independent. Q was weird, but P was just like a floater, like he could hang with anyone. L, M, N, O, they were tight, but they were not athletic. They were not, I always thought they were like, around, and they were, I don't know why. I think it's just, they're big, but they were pretty chill. But I always saw N as like underappreciated because you said it so fast. I thought N was like, he kind of got passed over because LM, and then like, I don't know, he's always soft, like not there. And then J and K, I thought were a couple for sure. They would go together. And then I thought H and I, they were good friends. They were the best friends you could ever ask for, and they were really tight. And then G, F, E, D were model citizens, but like A, B, and C, they were praised above all else. Like, they were the high scholastic, everything, like just model, like Spirit Awards, all of it. Because I got talked about the most, everyone really liked them. So, right, exactly. So, but I always thought, like, whenever I would get to RST in the alphabet, I always thought those cats are cool. Like, man, that's awesome. So that's my reasoning for why they're my top 3.
I like it. So T, S, R in that descending order. My third letter was the letter I, but the lowercase I, just because I really enjoy putting the dot on it. That's like the most satisfying letter to. And yeah, you can, but how many times do you write a lowercase J? Whereas a lowercase I, much more common when you're writing. I tend to write a lot by hand. I'm holding up a piece of paper for the people who are listening so they can hear me turning the pages here. so the letter I is just fun to write, and I think it's I think that it deserves that third spot. And then my fourth letter is the capital B. So I got the capital D, I got the capital B. Definitely narcissistic. I've got 4 letters that make up the 15 letters of my name here. And not that my 15-letter name is made up of 4 letters only, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you've explained your reasoning here. So I'm curious to see what your number 4 is.
The capital letter E. I don't know why. it is the capital letter E because I feel like it's in a lot of things, and I thought it always looked the coolest. I like when the fact that it is like an M on its side, like it has like the 3 prongs to it.
Yeah.
And I like when the middle prong is smaller. I like it.
Yes, that is how I hand letter in my notes on Sundays. It's a small middle.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we should have brought like a topography expert on to tell us about letters and fonts and things when we did this segment. But yeah, I like it when the middle part of the E is shorter than the other two. E is definitely, see, Mark, we could have gone so many ways with this, like what gender are these letters, what their profession is. We could have asked like what their, like you said, you kind of assign them all personalities in school. Like we could have done so much here.
Mm-hmm. And I will say for my actual top 5, for the one that I'm saying now, I kind of merged a lot of lists together. Like I have a whole separate list that's just for top 5 handwritten letters.
Ooh.
Like I have a top 5 for handwritten, but I also had my top 5 for the kind of like personality ones that I had. So I kind of mushed them together.
Nice. Well, on that note, what's your fifth letter?
5th letter is the lowercase y, and that's because it's super fun to write. It's I like to swoop it at the bottom and go up at the end, and I like it because you're ready to go into your next letter whenever you finish. So
you give a little lasso down.
I do indeed, and it's my favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite little thing to just put a little lasso and flick.
It's also used twice in happy birthday. So if you're writing birthday cards, you get to write that letter twice.
Well, and I like it because I take handwritten notes for church, and I write Sunday morning, evening, whatever at the top every day or every Sunday. So and Wednesday. So whenever
it's the end of every day.
Yeah, when there's a day, and whenever I have to write anything that has day in it, the ending of that is always fun because I get to finish it off with a lowercase y.
That's awesome. Yeah. My 5th ranked letter is the lowercase k because it's just different. Mm-hmm. Like the uppercase K is similar, but most of the lowercase letters that have a tall line on the left-hand side then have something like a circle, right? Or I mean, there's not a ton of those, but it's got 2 little lines that stick out, and it just feels like it's just kind of doing its own thing. Mm-hmm. And it seems like a very relaxed letter. Like the capital letter K seems very intense, and the lowercase K is like, there'll be another day tomorrow.
It's true.
So
the laid back version.
Yeah. So there's our top 5. Mine's DAIBK, and that's a capital D and a capital B. Mark's is all capital letters.
Mm-hmm. Except for the last one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right.
So 1 is T, 2 is S, R, E, and then lowercase y.
Awesome. Well, Mark, I had 45 people respond to a poll about this topic. So I'm going to give you the community's top 5. I asked people to rank their top 10 out of 52 because I felt like asking them to rank their top 52 would be pretty intimidating. So here's what I had. Their first overall winner was the letter A, capital letter A, and it had 91 points. The second was actually exactly the same as yours. It was the capital letter S, but it was behind A by 30 points. Like it was a big drop off. Then the capital letter D was third, so I feel a little vindicated. So it was really close to the capital letter S, and the capital letter R was 4th, and then right behind it was the capital letter J. So I thought it was interesting. I read earlier people's reasonings and the things that they used and the ideas that they had when they were ranking letters. So ASDRJ, all capitalized. There was actually only one lowercase letter in their top 10. Can you guess what it was?
I?
E.
Oh.
So, and the capital letter E also made it into their top 10. So you had something in common there. But we both had letters in our lists that showed up in their top 5, which I thought was interesting, but not the same letter. So it just goes to show you people take things and they interpret them differently. And what they decide kind of tells a story about themselves, or they can tell a story. I mean, I used to remember, Mark, I would draw letters that were under construction. And then there would be little stick figures working on building this letter, and I would draw my friends' names. So I would draw Tim or Matt or Jeff. And so the J would be almost complete, and the E would have some scaffolding, and the 2 F's would have girders that weren't paneled yet. And I would draw big cranes that were lifting up materials, and there were all kinds of little stick figures with hard hats on. But I've loved the alphabet for a long time because I love words, I love communication, and I thought it'd be fun to just rank the letters of the alphabet and see what stories came out of it.
Yeah, that's super fun. We should have an author and a typography designer on and have them just debate
like the best letters.
Yeah.
I love that idea. I also wanted to say, if you out there are listening and you're like, well, I want to vote for my top 5 letters, the way to be involved in things like this in the future is through our newsletter. Destination Arete, ARETE @gmail.com. Just send us a note saying you want to be subscribed, or destinationarete.com/contact. You can sign up on there. We've had several people contacting us through the website lately, Mark, and it's been encouraging just to hear their feedback, find out that they want to be part of the community. And we'll be sending out polls and different activities like this through the newsletter in the coming weeks. So if you want to be one of those people that gets those, I suggest doing that. And that is the end of the round 1 of our top 5, and we'll be right back for round 2. All right, welcome back from our non-existent sponsored segment. If you are out there and you want to sponsor the podcast, we have openings, and we are pretty cheap right now. So just hit us up, destinationarete.com/contact. We'd love to get in touch with you. And so that brings us to the second half of our top 5 episode, of our second top 5 episode. Too many numbers for you. We just talked about letters, but we are going to rank top 5 places. I'm sorry, I've lost Mark here. We're going to try and start again. We're going to rank top 5 places. And here's the thing. For those of you out there listening, I gave Mark the direction to rank the top 5 places he has ever painted. I, in turn, ranked the top 5 places I've ever read a book. You'll notice one of these activities creates something, the other consumes something. Mark, for those of you who maybe not are aware, subscribes to the ancient practice of plein air, where you go on location and paint what you see rather than bringing the location to your studio and painting what you think is there. Which I'm not saying still life is anything different than plein air. It's just still life, you only paint in the same place every time and you set up the lighting, whereas plein air, the lighting changes because the sun, it moves. So Mark, what did you think once again when I asked about the top 5 places you painted? What sprang into your mind?
I was really excited to rank them, and because it gave me an excuse to think back over the places that I have gotten to paint. And it also made me think of places that I still want to paint that I haven't gotten to yet. But mostly just it was a fun trip down memory lane, because I've got places on this list kind of from all throughout my very young journey, but the journey I've had so far.
That's awesome. Well, let's go in ascending order this time. So we'll start with number 5. For me, number 5, the 5th highest. So there are lots of places that I've read books, but number 5 is the library. Because when I was younger, I used to be able to read a book in the time it took for the rest of my family to get through the library. So I would often go in and find a book I wanted to read but didn't want to read at home for some reason, and read it, and then go pick out a couple more books to go home with. And there's just something about reading books at the library. In fact, I did this when I was younger, and then I did this when I was in college. I would, I think I've told this story before, but I would leave class and go to the library and take a nap. But I would also go to the library, find a book and read part of it and put it back and not check it out, not take it back to my dorm room with me, because I knew I wouldn't read it in my dorm room. So I read it in the library, because then that meant like there was a special place, it was quiet, I could read it. So the library for me, that's the 5th place on my list of places that I've ever read a book. Mark, how about you? Places you've ever painted a painting, number 5.
Number 5 for me is Adkins Farm. Adkins Farm is a place in Kansas City, Missouri. If you are from Kansas City, Missouri, and you know the area that we grew up in, if you go to the back of Carriage Hills and take a right instead of a left, you will go to a small little parking lot, and there's a cemetery there. And then if you go to the left, there is a place called Adkins Farm, and it's just literally a hill and then another hill and a building and then some woods, and I think there's an old barn there too. But I painted at that spot. It was 10 minutes away from the house, probably less, more like 5 or 4. So that was a place I could go to often to paint when I was first learning to plein air paint. And I remember that place holds that farm holds a very special place in my heart, because that was the first time I ever, because it was at that farm that plein air painting clicked with me for the first time.
Oh,
I had been taking lessons, and my instructor kept saying, now squint your eyes down and just see shapes and relationships between the shapes as far as their value and their color. Don't think of them as things. Think of them as abstract shapes that are just fitting together. And I was like, all right. But also, I kind of thought he was crazy. Like, I was like, I don't think you, like, that's a tree. It's not an abstract shape there, buddy. So, but for the first time, I had been practicing a lot, and I was on my own. The thing is, when I was with him, I could do it. Like, I could kind of figure out, because he would help me, and, and I'd be like, oh, okay, I think I see it. But on my own, for the first time, I had a little 7x9, and it was during the fall, and I painted this little brook with rocks. And for the first time, I just laid down shapes of color in a purely abstract way. But when I stepped back from it, it looked more real than anything that I had painted previously. And I literally ran around the farm doing laps, jumping up and down, just praising the Lord, and like just so hyped, because it was something that I've been working at for a long time, that I finally, for the first time, it just clicked with me that much. And I have been addicted to plein air painting ever since, honestly. Like, I get antsy if I don't do it for a while. It is one of those things that I look at that I do think maybe I'm made to do, simply because of how the experience that I have when I get a good one. And I've been chasing that high ever since. So
if that's the story you shared for number 5, I can't wait to hear the rest of these stories. Like,
well,
that's low on your list, man.
yeah, because the reason it's number 5 is because I painted there a lot.
Oh, okay.
So you'll see that as I go through it, when you're talking about places I've painted, not stories, I was ranking simply the places. And so I ranked them, I guess, subconsciously by their availability, and therefore how special they were, like how special the opportunity was, I guess.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'll let you take number 4 before I give mine. So your
Sure.
4th highest, or your 4th, I can't figure out how to quantify these. It's just number 4 on your list. Give us that one.
Number 4 on my list, Pensacola Beach.
Nice.
It's a place that I paint often, and I love going out at sunrise and painting the beach. I've had breakthroughs there as well, but it is a place that continually challenges me. But again, it's a place I have access to, and that's why it's lower on the list, because it's a place I could go to tomorrow, which I will go to tomorrow, but Lord willing. But it's a place that I go to often, but it's a place that I really enjoy painting.
I love it. Number 4 for me is also close to the beach. It is my grandma's house in Florida. And mostly because there was a summer that we spent there that, for some reason, reading, I think I had taken some of Dad's books from the glass cabinet. So I was kind of like reading some adult books, right? And there were some war books and some classic novels. And there's a book called The Talisman. And I don't know if you've ever read that one. It was on Dad's shelf for a long time. It's a very interesting book. I'm not going to wholeheartedly recommend it to anyone listening, but I will recommend it if you're interested in things like that. It's a piece of classic literature. But at Grandma's house, I don't know, there was just something about, there was a lot going on, and I could just kind of find a couch to read on for a while. This was before I was too easily distracted by everything going on around me, and I could focus more. But I just have really good memories of being young and reading a book at grandma's house. Not anyone reading to me or anything like that, but just grandma's house, number 4 on my list. All right, and then number 3 is under my covers of my bed between the ages of 8 and 10. And I I guess I had a flashlight. I don't remember the flashlight part, but I had to have because I had to turn my light off. My mom could see from the top of the stairs if the light from under my door was playing out into the basement, because our basement was dank, dark cavern that my light in my room was the lone beacon. And so I had to turn my light off. So, and I guess I didn't have a lamp that you would think you'd have on a bedside table. I had a bedside shelf because my bed was so tall. I had a bedside shelf, and above it was my cassette rack. Mark, I'm so old that there used to be this shelf that had these cassette slots in it that the tapes would fit in. And under that shelf was where I was supposed to put my books, but instead I would put them in my bed with me. And it would be all my library books. It would be all my favorite books. It would be my Bible. And I would just stay up until I don't know when. It probably wasn't as late as I think, because I was 8 years old. So I was probably going to bed around 8:30, 9 o'clock now. But then I would just stay up until I got tired of reading and would fall asleep. And I just remember that really well. I remember the books being in my covers, mom trying to make my bed and finding them. And I remember her telling me later in life, at least you were hiding books and you weren't hiding something else, you know? And I mean, what else can an 8-year-old hide? But yeah, under my covers when I was 8 to 10 years old, the only time in my life I had my own room until the age of 22 when I was a graduate assistant for 9 months. Yeah, that was my third place there on my list.
That's great.
How about you? Number 3.
Number 3 for me is a place called Andover, New York. It is technically it's upstate New York, but it's not in the upper part of the state. New Yorkers usually refer to anything outside of New York City as the upstate. And so it just means, to the left of New York City. And so it's right actually above the Pennsylvania border. So a place called Andover, New York. And I went on a painting trip there and stayed with Tim Cunningham, who's been on the podcast, and his episode's really great. You should check it out if you haven't already. And that was really a special experience for me because it was the first time that I was going somewhere to paint the landscape, I think. I had
not just I'm here with my family and I can.
Right. I had painted other places, but this was the purpose of the trip. Tim had said 3 days, 10 paintings, you and me. Like it was awesome. Like he kind of invited me up. He was very generous. He let me stay at the Airbnb that they were staying at. And we painted together and I learned so much from him. I literally still, as I'm going out to Pensacola Beach, am trying to improve on the things that he gave me feedback on. So that was a really special trip. And I felt like I made some good paintings. And it was the first time, one of the first times in my life that I had been in country that had a painting history to it. It was upstate New York, which meant that it had been painted for centuries, and it had been painted in the style that I really like. So a little thing about landscape painting is, especially in America, the South does not have a rich landscape painting tradition in the style of realistic impressionism, because realistic impressionism came around from like the 1870s, 80s, 90s into the early 1900s. And the South was experiencing Reconstruction during that time. So there was not a lot of money in the South. So it's really interesting. You can literally track where money is and art will be there. So up like New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, all those places had money post Civil War. So a lot of the landscape painters went north to paint. When you're painting landscape that has been painted before, I find it so much easier to find pictures because there are pictures to reference of what great painters saw this place as and represented it as. So that was kind of one of the first experiences I've had doing that. And that was really cool.
I love it. I love it. All right. Number 2, give us your second favorite place you've ever painted.
My second favorite place I've ever painted is at my grandpa's farm in Pennsylvania. So Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I was on a trip with my family, and I got to do a little 8x10 study from across the road looking at the farm. And that was so neat because it was a place that I had visited before. Um, and one thing that's really special about plein air painting that I really appreciate is when you're plein air painting, your senses are heightened, so because you're focusing so much, you tend to absorb more things, even just through your senses and through your memory. So I not only leave knowing what it looked like, but I can look back at that painting and I can usually feel the temperature. I can know who was around me at the time. I can know what time of day it was, things like that. So, and usually the surrounding events. So I remember, David, you walked out with our cousin, and I still remember you guys walking toward me in the field. It was straight mud. There was nothing. It was just mud and grass. So I stood there and I painted across the street, and that was a place that I had visited a lot as a kid. And it was a place we were literally there watching it being. It was a realtor there who was going to kind of put it on the market. It was things were getting moving. So it was kind of a last visit, and so being able to paint there on the last visit was really special to me because it was probably the last time potentially that the farm would be in the condition that it had been, and it kind of in the circumstance that it had been. And so I was really grateful in that moment to the Lord that He allowed me to get a good painting. So not all plein air paintings are good paintings. A lot of them are just straight garbage due to the error of the person making them. Um, and so I still at this stage in my career, I still feel like I'm very hit or miss. But man, I really felt like I hit that day, and the Lord allowed me to get a really nice little study. And from that, I've made a larger painting. But that little plein air study is something that is very special to me, and I was glad I was able to do it.
Yeah, I was there that day, and I was reminded of the fact that every time I've ever visited the farm, I have needed shoes that can get dirty. And I don't know, I think maybe 50% of the time I've ever had them. Because yeah, that it had, I don't know if it had just was flooded or something, but that field was just sucking the
Mhm.
shoes right off your feet. Like, yeah. Oh man, I love that. For those of you listening, I appreciate you bearing with me. My allergies killing me. Mowed the yard last night. Terrible decision. So, my number two place I've ever read a book is my wife bought this rocking chair on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace, and she put it next to the wood stove that we have in the house where I currently live. And for me, this is my second favorite place I've ever read because this is where I fell back in love with reading. As an adult, I decided it was time to read, and I started setting aside 10 to 15 minutes every morning before work to read whatever book it was that I was working through. And I've read multiple books in that chair, self improvement books. I've read some novels. I've read some biographies, and for me, especially in the wintertime, you get the wood stove going, and it's kind of warm and cozy. There's a little blanket because I'm an old person, cover my feet up, and then I get a pillow on my lap, and I get my cup of oatmeal, and I get my book out and read my devotions there. And it's just a great place in my house that brings me lots of memories because you know I've talked about some memories I've had in these other places, but for this one it'll be great memories for me because this is where I decided it was time to start reading again, and I've been so blessed. Got to read some books of people that we've talked to, got to read some books that were illustrated by people we've talked to, and then possibly read some books that people we would like to talk to on this podcast. So, yeah, that would be my number two place in the world that I've ever read a book. All right, so my number one place that I've ever read a book is an old blue chair, and I like this chair because it's where I learned to read. My dad taught me using a primer, Tom and Someone's Adventures with Little Dogs and Cats and words that are easy for 5-year-olds to read. And that is where I learned to read. That is where many books were read to me. That is where I read my sister many books, my sister Amy especially. It was a chair that was given to my parents before I was born. I've read several books as an older person on it because it's been various places in my parents' house. This is my favorite place that I've ever read a book because it is now in my house, and I will be reading to someone else in my family very soon. That for me is number one on my list, and that is my reason why.
That's great. That's a great answer. Yeah. Okay. Number one on my list is kind of cliche, but it's the Grand Canyon.
Oh,
So
cool.
I got to plein air paint, and this was like a one-time thing. Like I got to plein air paint one time at the Grand Canyon, and my family was so nice, and my dad was amazing, and they got me there at sunrise. Like like they got up early, like we were on vacation, and they got up early. We all jumped in the car and we drove there. We'd been there the day before, but we drove to a specific spot.
Had you
And
scouted it out?
I think dad
Okay.
knew it was gonna be a good spot. I don't know if I had been there yet, but I think he kind of looked at the map and was like, this will be a good spot. So but it was great. We got there at sunrise. I got to do two little paintings. They turned out all right. And they were, I cherish them because they're evidence that I got to paint at the Grand Canyon, you know. And that's a place that's been painted many times by many people. But I think it also uh I love being places at sunrise. Um, a lot, a lot. There's something special about being somewhere at sunrise. Like the Grand Canyon, I remember being there during the midday, and there was so many people. And there was pictures, and there were people, and there's kids and everything running around. But you get there at like 5 a.m. and it's just you, your family, and maybe one other dude who's like super serious about this, you know. And but you're there for a common purpose, which is just to take in the sunrise over the Grand Canyon. And I am so blessed that I get to do something that in some way participates with that or responds to that in the moment. It's a plein air paint's a very responsive act, and I'm very blessed that I get to do that. Um, and so I love being able to be in that moment. And I think that it was just very special. I still remember like mom and Amy and Bethany wrapped in blankets, you know, because it's freezing in the morning. And then dad had his binoculars and he was already looking at stuff, and he would point and say, hey, there's something over there, you know, look at the sunrise. And it was fiery red, just the most beautiful thing. And that is, yeah, that's probably my favorite place I've ever painted.
When you go somewhere at midday, the other people that are there may or may not be there on purpose. Like they may have just ended up there. But when you go somewhere at sunrise, anyone you see, they're here on purpose. Like
That's a
the
great point.
beach, the Grand Canyon, the grocery store,
Mhm.
anywhere it is that you're there at sunrise, the people there are there on purpose.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to be part of that community.
I even love gas stations at sunrise. Those are hardworking folks. Like, those are awesome. Like, you're there and you're getting your breakfast burrito and they're getting their breakfast burrito, and you're like, man, you're probably gonna go like save the world right now. And we don't even know it. Like, it's so cool. So
Yeah, you're gonna go earn this.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna go play basketball.
I'm gonna go play basketball. Love it, love it. All right, Mark. So give me your 5 through 1 again and the painting that you painted each of those places.
Okay. So 5 is Atkins Farm in Kansas City, Missouri. I painted a fall scene. That was the first time I felt like plein air painting clicked with me. Pensacola Beach is number 4, and that's been a lot of different studies. Number 3 is Andover, New York, and there's specifically a painting of a red barn facing the front of it that under sunlight, it was a morning light. And I really felt like that was a good one that I got there. Number 2 is my grandpa's farm in Pennsylvania, and the painting was of my grandpa's farm. And then number 1 is the Grand Canyon, because it's like a really crazy place to be able to say you got to paint. And it was at sunrise, and I got 2 paintings there.
Crazy place for someone who lives close to the Mississippi River or even farther east, you know, like
Yeah.
at the time you got to go there, it was quite a long drive. Pretty cool. All right, for me, number 5 was a library, and I think it was Lord of the Rings that I read a little bit by little bit during college. And then there are other books from when I was younger. Grandma's House, I think it was The Talisman. Number 3, under my covers, it was actually the first time I read through the Bible, and I still have that Bible somewhere. Number 2, The Rocky Chair Next to the Wood Stove. If I had to pick a book, oh man, that's too tough. I can't do that. I just have read a bunch of books in the last couple years. Maybe Deep Work. That's where I read Deep Work. So that's a good one. If you haven't read Deep Work, go for it. And then That Old Blue Chair, wherever it might be in the world, is where I enjoy reading. And the book that I probably remember the most reading on that chair is the book that I learned to read from, the little primer that my dad taught me out of. So yeah, those are our top 5 lists. And we appreciate everybody listening along so far.
I want to thank past David and Mark for joining current David and Mark on this episode. And you can follow them on Instagram, and you can follow David on Facebook. I think, can you follow David on Twitter? I think you can. Yeah, you can follow David on Twitter. So, man, thanks, past David and Mark.
I tweet once a month.
And they're always bangers. So I get most of them. I get all the tweets.
I send all the drafts to Mark, and then I pick one and send it.
If I send fire emojis, he knows. Send it. So, and I only say that because that's what I actually do with David. I just send David all my tweets, and I don't have a Twitter. Okay.
We should actually try that for a month. I should tweet all the things you text me.
Oh,
and then see if we actually like hit it. Yeah, I should see.
I don't think the reason I don't tweet is because I don't think I'm as profound as I think I am, but you're always very kind and say, oh, this is really cool. So, but as always, as far as Destination Arte goes, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and you'll get more episodes like this one. And you can leave us a comment or a review. That really helps the algorithm know that you liked the content. You can share the content with other people. That also helps the algorithm know. So we just we're really grateful to you guys as listeners, and thank you guys so much for all the stuff that you do, for listening and for sending us feedback.
Yeah, Mark, Jennifer commented on a YouTube video recently with our interview with Jameson Jekyll. She said, this was a great interview. I really enjoyed it. She said, I liked as how a teacher, he was continuing to research and discover new things to share with his students. And she also mentioned that she looked up that Pinterest board and shared it with an art student she knows. So great times over there on YouTube. I mean, now's the time to get involved. We just hit 100 subscribers, and things are really picking up steam over there. Hopefully, Lord willing, in the coming months and years, we'll have more content than just the episodes on there. But send this episode to a friend. I had someone recommend a podcast episode to me today at work, and I looked it up, wrote it down, and they said they always tell me podcast episodes that they think I will be interested in, and they are always right. Whenever you get someone that sends you something, you're like, I thought of you, I think you'll like this, they're always right. So if you do that for someone else, we would really appreciate it.
Yeah, and you can share our content with people through things like Facebook and Instagram. Those are great ways to connect with us. They're great like avenues to share things. For instance, with Instagram, we usually put up when we have a new episode coming out. You can just send that, straight to a friend through direct message and be like, hey, new episode just came out. I thought of you. You should check this out. I've heard you mention this artist, or this is a topic that you might be interested in. So as far as Facebook and Instagram go, our handle on there is Destination Arete, ARETE. And if you connect with us through those platforms, then you'll get more information about upcoming interviews like this one, information about community activities, and upcoming Arte projects.
All right, friends, it has been a battle for us to record this episode. So we're going to just cut it off here. We're going to say good night. We're going to say God bless. We're going to say see you in 2 weeks with another episode or another interview. Peace.